Good afternoon, everybody, and thanks for joining this panel. The topic here is Deep Tech Outlook, and we have a very esteemed group of people. And I apologize in advance. Some of the names I can't fully pronounce. Dan, who I think we said was online? No.
He should be, yes.
Okay. Dan, who is Managing Director of Palm Beach Capital Funding. Katya, who's here today, is Executive Vice Chairman of Constructor Group. Andreas is the Managing Director of Avalon Securities. Konstantin is the CEO and CIO of Tenviz, and then me. So let's start off with Andreas. You are you lead an investment bank where you advise.
Why don't we start off with Konstantin?
Okay.
Andreas is not on, right? I have to dial him up.
Konstantin, you are the CEO of Tenviz, which uses AI and ML to predict asset flows for quant investors like myself. So if you were going to pitch a quant fund manager, what would you pitch?
Actually, will not pitch you at all. Can you hear me? We would not pitch you at all because we think actually at least our vision is actually quants are least receptive for quant tools because they already have something. And I think the best recipient is actually a fundamental investor, so-called discretionary investor.
Okay, can you tell us a little bit about your offering and how you're using AI and machine learning to predict asset flows?
I'm sorry?
Can you tell us a little bit about how you're using AI and machine learning to predict asset flows?
That's right. The idea is actually what we have tasked ourselves many years ago, and we started way before the term AI became a household terminology. We thought that even in 2009, when we started experimenting with AI, that humans can no longer effectively outcompete each other, so they need to be better equipped with computers and AI. So that was our vision all along. So we were and are still developing a branch of AI, predictive AI. It's not a generative AI. I'm just making it very clear. There's no such thing as AI. There are many variations and permutations, and we in the branch of predictive AI, because if you use obviously generative AI and you ask where S&P will be next week or next decade, it has no way of knowing.
Thank you for saying that there's actually no AI, because that was in my original version of the PowerPoint, but it was too complicated to explain. It's
the AI edited that comment out.
The AI, yeah, the AI put itself in because it knew it wasn't real. Okay, Katya, well, we've got you here. If you could talk about what it is that, how you use technology to drive a legal tech company.
Sure. Can you hear me? I'm going to stand up because I can't see half of you, and I feel very, very lonely here by myself with everybody else on. Hi. So, hi. Oh, look, I have so many friends. Oh, so,
Got a new one now.
Wonderful. I'll hopefully make
Lots of fun.
So we're kind of like wake everybody up a little bit. Okay. So I'm Katya. I'm an attorney. I'm vice chairman of Constructor Group. We are a family office that oversees a group of companies. We have a venture fund, we have a software company, we even have a nonprofit arm where we have a university in Germany. The family office that I represent through our various investments and the like, we have about 300 companies in our portfolio. I've been a practicing attorney for 15 years. I was a partner in a large firm. I was also the chief data privacy officer of that firm before I went in-house about 5 years ago. So I've seen it all around the world, and because of the fact that I work with a lot of tech entrepreneurs, I started thinking the way that they think, right? And seeing how they look at the world and realizing that so much of what I do can totally be automated. And I started out as one of those attorneys who said, like, yeah, AI is cool, but it can't do what I do, right? Now I think it can do everything I do and better. So I started my own sort of software project within the ecosystem. We started building out just sort of a little proof of concept, and now I have spun it out into a startup that's funded by a Constructor Group, but we're 16 engineers now we are growing, and basically what the tool does, to put it very simply, is due diligence. All of the due diligence, I once paid €500,000 for a due diligence project for a bunch of young associate attorneys to read pieces of paper and tell me what they say. And I just don't want to do that anymore.
Can I interrupt? So what kind of, was it due diligence on a contract, on an
So that
investment?
was special, that was for a university acquisition, so that's why it was particularly expensive. But the point is that these days, right, we do due diligence all the time. So for example, I represent all these companies, I represent a fund, I do a lot, you know, we're all the way up to like Series D companies, so there's a lot of sort of VC, PE, family office work. And the point is that because I'm in-house, I'm not incentivized to waste time, right, and spend lots of money. And so now, using AI, when we get access to a deal room, we run the documents through, 20 minutes later, I have 90% of my memo ready.
Fascinating. And are you using root words? Are you using like a RAG process or retrieval augmented? How, all of it?
I'm using it all, so basically we're agnostic to LLMs, so we've tested everything from Anthropic, ChatGPT, Llama, Mistral, Grok, you name it. We have built our own small language model called the Airport SLM. We are also using that for another reason, which is security reasons. So we built an automated redaction tool inside the system. So basically all the really sensitive stuff, because like 90% of legal contracts is boilerplate, right? So I don't care, let ChatGPT read it, doesn't matter. But we encrypted names of people, passport numbers, bank account information, etc., so that if we want to work with these closed LLM systems and use them on the back end together with RAG and with these other techniques, we can, but then we also built our own SLM. So now we're running a sandbox with one of the Attorney General's offices in the United States. Can't say which one yet, but the reason that they were happy to work with us was specifically because of the fact that we're able to do things in a more secure format than our competitors.
That sounds really fascinating. So hypothetically, or we can use an example, fund manager walks in and says, I want to update, I want to write I need a new PPM. What does that process look like?
To draft the PPM?
Yeah.
So our
Or do you not
tool
work with-
doesn't do original drafting.
Okay.
Our tool we do have a markup tool. So what we are able to do, for example, and this is something where I encourage human in the loop processes, right? I don't think AI by itself is okay. So the idea basically is this: you have an attorney, whether it's in-house, external, or my law firm, doesn't matter. We'll come to you and say, listen, these are the things when you are negotiating those PPMs, I want you to make sure that these are always the deal breakers. These are always the things that you want to have. We can automate that. We can stick it in so that every single time a third party sends you a PPM, boom, 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 it will not only go ahead and run through the checklist, but it'll do the editing and markup and change the language for you.
Fantastic. I don't know if you heard my presentation earlier today, but I was talking about using AI to enhance the accuracy and speed at which operations can happen, and I think that's exactly what you're doing.
Isn't the issue of AI and law is that somebody has to take responsibility for what the AI creates, right?
Yeah, so the point is that there's a human in the loop process, right? So there's a couple of things. First of all, it's not legal advice. This is information. The biggest legal tech company in the world is LegalZoom. It's also not legal advice, it's information. But the point is that, first of all, we're selling to people like you, right? Who are presumably sophisticated enough and smart enough to understand when they need an attorney and what this information means. If you are an investor, you need to be at least almost as smart as your lawyer in order to get deals closed, right? We're not giving legal advice. We're not telling you how to go ahead and, deal with a dispute. There's a lot of things we don't touch. All we're doing is looking at large data sets and just telling you what they say.
So the end product is a memo.
The end product is a memo and the ability to do Q&A. So for example, let's say you even have tons of deals that you've done in the past. I always had a problem that every single time I was ever on vacation, I'm like sitting on a beach somewhere, tanning myself, and then somebody text messages me on WhatsApp and says, Kaita, do you remember like 4 years ago, we did that deal with that guy? Do I have board observer rights? Right? And I gotta go and I gotta look through all this stuff and I gotta figure it out and I gotta answer it. I don't wanna do that anymore. So now that everything is all of a sudden categorized, I can just get a chatbot to find that info for me.
It's a lot easier than Control F.
Correct.
Yeah, okay. What does your typical deal look like?
I mean, typical deals, we've done it sort of across the board. Again, I'm very, very lucky that I have this amazing testing ground, right? I have my own in-house legal team that reports to me. I have lawyers in Switzerland, Germany, and the United States. We've done everything from very early stage stuff to, you know, Series D companies. So I've been able to test this. I've been able to test this against external law firms to kind of see and understand what the difference is and quantify it. In terms of the companies, third parties that are using the platform right now, like I mentioned, AG office, I have several venture capital firms, private equity firms. We tried selling to law firms.
Yeah.
They weren't happy. So, you know, I'm very open to selling to law firms. I believe this is the future. I think law firms are not revolutionary, they're typically evolutionary. So the lead times to get them to adopt something, look into things is much slower.
Yeah, I definitely agree that your way of doing business is the future of the industry. Any questions? Any other questions from the audience? Okay, you had were you working on Andreas? Is he on the?
Andreas is online, but
Okay.
he hasn't upgraded yet.
Okay. Dan is not on, is that
Dan
correct?
isn't on yet, yes, I'm trying to get Andreas to convert, and he's not
Okay.
converting.
Constantine, let's go back to you. If you could tell us how you built your models, are they and what your typical client looks like?
Okay, Andreas is converted now, so he's up.
Okay,
Why don't we go to Andreas first, and then we'll go back to Constantine.
Andreas, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. My name is Andreas Deutschmann. I've led teams in functions such as audit, valuation, diligence, investment management, risk management, financial modeling. And I did that as a managing director at JP Morgan, a manager at Deloitte & Touche, and a vice president at John Hancock. I've carried out those duties in places like Chicago, Boston, New York, Vienna, Luxembourg, Zurich, Singapore, and Tokyo. And currently I work for Avalon Securities. We're an independent boutique investment bank, and we raise capital for early stage companies across all sectors. And I focus on what we call our innovation technologies, which is essentially AI. And I'm also an adjunct professor at the Central European University in the city of Budapest, which is the like 'em or not like 'em university funded by George Soros. And I also am an advisor to Be a Leader, a Cameroonian foundation that supports the United Nations Women's Initiative to impact 1 million women in Central Africa by 2035. And I'll leave it at that.
Okay, as an investment banker, what are you seeing in the capital markets in terms of capital raising and M&A and early stage AI companies?
Well, I think we're at a very interesting inflection point so far as AI really has kind of exploded as of late. Think about previous innovations in the industrial world. When James Watt came up with the steam engine, 1850s, it became the primary workhorse for all manufacturers. It was such that the steam engine was in the center of the building. The buildings were multi-story and very wide laterally, and all of the machinery, be it drill press, lathes, and grinders, were hooked together on rubber lathes throughout the entire factory. We're talking about thousands and thousands of lathes, and the placement of the engines, the machines that needed the most power, were closest to the center of the factory. Why do I say that? Electricity came along later. It was implemented then in a one-way fashion. You could disseminate electricity cheaply in any way, shape you wanted. It didn't matter how much power any individual machine needed, and it turned it into what we call mass production, a la the Rouge River plant by Henry Ford back in 1927. We're kind of at the same kind of stage where we're moving to a new platform networks with AI, and we're currently kind of using a lot of small point-to-point tactical solutions, be it prompt engineering or wrappers and whatnot. So we're going to shift in the sourcing of early-stage AI and other innovative technology. The latest figures I've seen, there's 64,000 startups in that world globally as of last year. And there's a lot of people doing a good job pursuing them, categorizing them, and seeding them. I don't know if anybody would take a guess, but if you look at NVIDIA, they have an inception program where they provide sometimes funds and also GPU usage to early stage AI companies. Anyone want to take a guess how many startups are in their stable? 22,000. 1/3 of all startups they've got an insider's view into. So my point being is we have these large VCs in Palo Alto. Now we have other competitors being the Big Seven or the Magnificent Seven. It's becoming a very interesting time to live in the VC world, but with the changes that we at least see at Avalon happening in the networks and platforms with AI in the next 3 years and beyond.
Okay, interesting. Sticking with the theme of early stage companies, Katya, for family offices investing in early stage companies, how can AI tools like Core help improve operational efficiency and reduce costs across their portfolios?
Sure, so I think I mostly answered that previously, sort of explaining these types of things, but I think when you're a family office, there are a lot of different AI tools, actually, that you can look across, right? And so different tools are now being integrated in to be able to figure these things out. So Core really is dealing with contracts and due diligence. We've been experimenting past legal contracts to see if we can do financial due diligence, right? To see if we can look at patents, things like that. I will say that the tool's been doing a fairly good job, because we like to sort of push its boundaries and see. But I've also seen that, in Constructor Group, we're also building out other software tools as well, and different things that can be used. So some ideas have to do with, for example, really being able to look not just at the due diligence and the legal documents of the company, but for example, being able to really understand a company's valuation from looking at lots of different data points off of the internet, right? Being able to really understand, is this gonna be the next big thing? And being able to kind of put all of these sort of disparate things together and use an AI sort of, assistant brain to take a look at deals and understand if deals are viable, understand projections, put these things together. I would say that in terms of financial projections, ChatGPT and these other tools are kind of famously hilarious if you use them for this kind of thing. They hallucinate, they have a lot of issues, a lot of problems, which by the way is why you have AI companies that are building on top. I think that this whole idea of like a wrapper has received a very negative connotation, but ChatGPT is a wrapper of NVIDIA and so on and so forth. I mean, it just doesn't really matter. And so there are a lot of tools that are now coming out that are really, really focusing, and I think that the future is really going to be not about these large language models that purport to do everything, but about very, very niche products that are very good at doing specific things.
It's like the difference between having internet access versus a mobile app.
Correct.
Yeah. One thing, I guess, as it relates to data privacy, obviously this is a big topic for businesses adopting AI. How are you going to address that and still deliver value?
So I would say that data privacy is my number one biggest concern. I actually am surprised by how blasé people are about data privacy these days, and I guess I'm not. I sort of understand why, and the reason why is because we've all become accustomed to working in the cloud. And so there's this idea with cloud products, cloud tools, like, look, privacy is kind of dead. You give up a modicum of privacy for the ability to work in cloud, right? That's sort of how it's been for the last 20 years. We're used to it, it's okay. But here's the thing that I would say. You have had this sort of decentralization with data being put in cloud tools all of these years. You've never had it so heavily centralized, and you've never had the ability to structure data like that the way that you do now with AI. So for example, there was this really funny thing, I've seen it all over social media, LinkedIn, Instagram, whatever, people say, oh, I asked ChatGPT, draw a picture of me based on what you know about me. And it's drawing these like amazing, super accurate pictures in seconds.
Wow.
Doesn't that scare you? Right? Think how much data and information people are handing over. So the question then becomes, okay, well, what do we do about it? Because at the same time, we want to move forward with these technology tools. So these are the things that I would recommend for all of you just to pay attention to, okay?
Well, there's actually, so one thing that people don't consider is that it's a strategic advantage to people not knowing your data. And I'll give you an example. There's a guy who's in the family office space who nobody really knew anything about him, but he was running all these events in Dubai. But all of his divorce records were public record in the United States. A guy who runs family office events in Europe, where that's not public record, went and exposed him, got him on like the front page of like Vogue or one of these magazines.
Vanity Fair.
What's that?
Vanity Fair. So
It was the
Anthony
front page of-
Rotosa, he
Yeah, and
made
then
himself-
I remember
he
that.
made
That was
himself
fun.
a lord or a sir, and he wasn't even English.
So,
We know that happened, right? But the fact is that he was living in the United States, the divorce records are public records. And the guy that exposed him was a guy who nobody knows anything about, who lives in Germany, right? But has an in into Vanity Fair, right? Because Vanity Fair is doing an event on somebody, a story on somebody who runs small time events, it's not like a big deal, right? So people don't realize that there's this imbalance in data, right? People know stuff about us and we know nothing about them. And that should be scary.
data is the most valuable asset that we have on this planet, okay? It's the most valuable thing. It is worth more than anything else, is data. That is number one. All of you as investors, but it's asymmetrical information, it's asymmetrical warfare that keeps you making money, right? If you don't know if everybody knows exactly the same stuff and everyone's sharing the same data, like what's the point of all these funds and there's no point. So data is king. And so the thing is this, these are the things that you want to keep in mind when you're working with AI tools. First of all, you should work with AI tools, they're amazing, and if you don't know how to work with them, you're going to be obsolete very soon, I guarantee it. The second thing is this, if you are using ChatGPT, if you're using Anthropic, if you're using whatever it is that you're using, the regular version, they're training off your data. And they're using your data. And the thing about AI is like, we don't know what happens with that data, we don't know what happens with that information, we don't know when the AI is gonna like become a sentient being and what it's gonna do, right? So if you use enterprise versions, which obviously my company does, and all of my competitors use, all the good ones, right? They use enterprise level agreements. Now the enterprise level agreements have privacy policies that clearly state we do not train on this data, and we don't retain the data past what's necessary for, FBI type of purposes. Same thing with Microsoft Azure, data centers, etc. That is enough to be SOC 2 compliant, that's enough to be ISO compliant, right? So that's enough to kind of meet the standards that people are accustomed to. And for most people, that's more than enough. But I would just say, OpenAI is getting sued left and right? Microsoft owns like half of it. They're not exactly known for being the most, ethical people on the planet.
None of these guys are.
None of these guys are. And now you have everybody putting in their hopes, their dreams, their ideas, their, investment deals, legal documents, tax file, whatever, into one centralized place, whether OpenAI, Anthropic, which is Google, right? And a couple of other just like key players, and that's it. And now that data can be structured in seconds because you can ask OpenAI, draw a picture of me based on everything you know of me, and in seconds it does it. So it's not unstructured data anymore where it's like, it'll take, a million years to figure out what this means. It's structured. So that's why in my company, we built extra security protocols. So that's why we started working on having a tool for redaction that would just clean out the really sensitive stuff before it goes to these other companies. And we built our own small language model. So with our small language model, we're able to go ahead and offer the same stuff, but we can do it one of two ways. We can host it on the servers that we work with. We work with a company called G-Core, which is based out of Luxembourg. They have servers in the US and everywhere else. So we can sort of limit it based on what the customer needs. Yes, that means you're trusting a third party, but at least it's a little bit more contained than, OpenAI, right? Or for some companies that want to do it, it's very costly and it's annoying and it's a lot of work. They can host it on their own servers, and then you have a completely closed system, right? So that's the type of stuff that we've been looking at and thinking about when it comes to security and privacy. But the point is that for all of you, whether or not you're interested in ARIC or anything like it, at least make sure you're working with enterprise level tools and above before you give everything away.
Can you give,
I have,
go ahead, please.
yeah, so my question is, what level of knowledge is the AI at in terms of legal knowledge? Does it know most of the semantic knowledge? Or is the issue with AI data or being able to reason and draw conclusions?
Think about it like this, right? So think about LLMs, large language models, think of them as like really smart college freshmen. Okay?
They're, at least in math, they're a lot further along than college freshmen.
Yes.
Not all the time, Marty, not all the time, like they hallucinate, okay? And so the thing is, just like college freshmen, they're super smart, they think they know it all, and they sound like they know it all, right? So you can go into ChatGPT and you can ask all kinds of complex stuff, and it's confident, and it's good. And when you double check the work, you're like, oh my gosh, what is this BS that it's giving me? But sometimes it's also amazing, right? It's just sort of very uneven. So what you have to think of is that when you have AI companies that are utilizing these tools, right? Whether it's a small language model like what we built, how did we build that? We built that off of open source. We built that off of Llama, which is Meta's AI, but it's an open source tool, so we can just go ahead and fine tune it, right? Or they're building off something else with retrieval augmented generation, blah, blah, blah. Imagine it's like we're now taking the college student through law school. Okay, and training that student to learn and understand and look at things the right way. I found that when I went to these LLMs and I would, let's say, upload a PPM and say, summarize this for me, 100 times I can put in that prompt and it's gonna give me a different answer every time. Sometimes the answer's amazing and sometimes the answer's like, there are 2 parties to this contract and there is a signature page, right? And just all of this just absolutely useless nonsense all the time, and then I have to spend 10 hours prompting it and training it. And I don't need that, like I could have done the work myself, right? So in our tool, we train the tool. 1 click, you get a summary, just like you would from one of the people in my little team.
So,
That's the value add.
Exactly what you just mentioned.
Yeah.
Gone through, where sometimes it's good and sometimes it's absolute crap.
Yeah.
So where are we on that process in terms of when and how to solve that in a short time frame of the month? Because I actually went through this with my team and just said, look, guys, just do it ourselves. This is not helping us.
So that's why you need products like ARIC.
Yes, you don't do it on your best.
Sold.
That's fine.
what industry are you in?
I invest in private equity venture capital.
Oh,
What industry is he not in?
oh, it's all right, okay.
The point
I was
is,
just trying to think of use
you
cases.
need to work with companies that are very focused on solving these problems. LLMs, they're just a raw material to work with, right? There's so
You're gonna
much
find
to
these
do
range
on top.
It's gonna get you to the 30-yard line, but you're still gonna have to run the last 30. It's how I
I
look
don't
at
mind
it.
the 80-20, but just going back to your comment, sometimes I got to 5, sometimes I got to 70, and it's just really too much variance.
So we spent 7 months doing one thing, right? Because I'm a little, in a good way, but like, very, very detail oriented, and I'm the type of person that I see a problem, like I can't stop thinking about it until I fix it. So when I noticed this inconsistency, when I was using LLMs to get these responses, right, it drove me crazy. And so in the beginning, we started just working with, RAG and basically prompts underneath, training it. Imagine you're a lawyer and you have to answer these 10 questions. And it was pretty good for 1 piece of paper. But then me being crazy, I took a giant folder of documents and I put in all the corporate governance documents of like a Series C company. And I was like, now figure it out, right? And what we found was that AI is actually not trained at all to be able to pick and choose between these different documents. So what happens is that then, let's say you upload 10 documents to an LLM, and you ask a question, it will give you an answer. But the answer will be based on randomly selecting one page from one piece of paper. So you don't know if it's a holistic answer and if it didn't catch something, and then you still have to read everything to figure out whether or not it was correct. So you're kind of like, okay, this was fun and entertaining, but I can't trust it. Those are the problems that we spent the last year solving in my team. Specifically, obviously, for the type of things that we're trying to solve it for. But it's that focus and that commitment to precision.
I'll give another example. When the internet first came out, you used to have to put keywords in quotes and put, and you remember, and put the word "and" in between these two keywords. To some extent, that's how a lot of these LLMs work. Of course, you don't have to put stuff in quotes or use the word "and" or, but depending on how you prompt the LLM will determine the quality of the output received.
So I think it's easier, and it's great what you've done, but I think it's easier to do the legal documents and legal and doing it on the investment, right? I think it's more, perhaps more area.
So I think with investment memorandums, right, easier or hard, it's different, right? And so the thing is that with an investment memorandum, I think you're looking at multiple variables. And the question is, where did you get that data from? And that's the biggest challenge, right? Like it's what I was talking about earlier. So the thing is that with legal docs, you just get the information based on the documents that are set in front of you. For you, when you're looking at investing in a deal, you might be looking at the founders, right? You need to see people, you need to understand certain things. There's a lot of stuff that's kind of abstract that can't necessarily be quantified in something that you can upload. And the A is only as smart as the data that you provide it. So I would say that there's that limitation. But with time and more usage, that will change also. Because for example, with my tool, when we have a third party that uses it, the more they use it, the smarter the AI becomes at figuring out how they think.
I don't want to leave Constantine out of this conversation. Does any of this resonate as it relates to predicting asset flows, or how is the technology transferable in your market?
I think actually when I build up a little bit on what Katya was talking about, I think she has mentioned that say in proposals and down the road during due diligence, that's where LLMs could be very helpful. But she actually I totally agree with you. That's actually for making investment recommendations where there is a heavy element of predictions. You need, first of all, I think as Katya was mentioning, heavy domain expertise. And that's exactly where, and additionally, on top of that, even more importantly, you need to assume inherent unpredictability of some sort of outcome. So essentially, it's completely different problem. It's a completely different problem. And that's exactly where I, on one hand, agree with Katya completely. But at the same time, when she was saying like exploring, say, valuation and all this, connecting all the dots and finding out the next big thing, that's actually where LLMs have no way of knowing. There is no LLM in the world. You can ask it 300 times, what's the next big thing? It will throw you existing ideas. It will tell you only what humans already know. It will tell you AI and maybe biogenomics and all that stuff, but it will not tell you some sort of like molybdenum exploration on Mars by some sort of like a rocket launched by Musk, right? So this knowledge, that's what comes to markets. You have to assume a healthy degree of unpredictability. So it's kind of like conditional probabilities, Bayesian distribution, and so on. And that's what we do. I can give you a couple of examples, maybe even share with the screen if you don't mind for a second. So what we do, we try to forecast something that is not obvious. Let me say it again. I think what Katya was explaining, that how AI automates human process, saves the cost and so on. But at the core, they're still doing what the humans can do. Maybe slightly better, maybe slightly faster, but in general, it's replicating human process. What we try to do is to tell you something that is not obvious with inherent uncertainty. And for example, so this is actually our existing forecast for global energy as an industry. And we had a sell all along, and 2 days before election, we had a short. So that's a short signal avoiding. So we did know that upon election, as the president-elect has announced potential scrapping subsidies to the renewable energy. That was the reason for this drop. Yet again, our tools were able to conclude that with a high level of certainty to produce that signal. So that's what we do. We try to forecast something that is inherently humans cannot really do very, very well. I can give you even more dramatic examples when we were able to forecast how I'm looking at S&P 500 now. We were able to forecast sell-off before COVID. So remember, COVID happened basically at the end of March 2020. Governments were shutting down the countries, and our tools were able to generate a sell on S&P 500 way before that happened. So there is no history in the world. No LLM model even now would have said like, oh, we look at 300 cases of previous COVIDs in the US and concluded that usually S&P drops 35%. No. That information doesn't exist. So what we try to do is actually, it's the next generation. We do it predictive AI, where we try to tell you something meaningful and very, very important before that happens. So it's a bit of up on what Katya was saying, but at the same time, in agreement and healthy kind of like build up on what
So maybe I'll just jump in. We're looking at early stage companies. So we build heat maps using AI to give us a sense for what should we be investing in from a return on investment standpoint. So we look at innovative technology in like 12 groupings: artificial intelligence, cybersecurity, blockchain, video gaming, crypto, Web3, cloud, virtual reality, metaverse, 3D printing, robots, drones, quantum computing. And our AI tells us that we should be spending 10 times as much on artificial intelligence in terms of investments as opposed to robots, drones, and 3D printing. And the main difference there is artificial intelligence is basically chips, data, energy, and an operating system. Once you get to robotics and 3D printing and drones, you're talking about, again, chips, data, energy, and operating systems. Plus, you have to get into the physical supply chain: copper, plastics, aluminum, gold, platinum, and whatnot, which really kills the overall costing versus things like cybersecurity, blockchain, video gaming. And I could go into greater detail if anyone cares to, either now or afterwards.
I have some questions on that. You know, what's interesting, I know you have this heat map, is that United States Venture Partners presented to us a couple of years back, actually several times. But they're an old school VC fund. They probably had, 15 different funds over the years, 15 vintages. And they showed this chart that said this is the return on all of investments, and that 10x, on the bar chart was there's security and cybersecurity business. They were making all their money on that.
Yeah.
Right. And so, it seems like this would be something that would be valued a lot of, venture capital, private equity type people who would say, oh, I'm looking, where's the best place for me to be? Now, chasing those sorts of returns is kind of ephemeral, don't you think? Because once everybody has the same knowledge, they're going to come to the same conclusions, and then prices go up, right?
That's true, unless you can get yourself into a monopolistic or oligopolistic situation, or you have IP or a moat to protect your technology. I mean, I think it's very difficult these days for early stage to pull out those 10Xs because you've got 7 companies that have over 50% of the market cap of the entire United States equity capital, and they're all getting into the seeding business, and they're all getting great looks at, like I said, NVIDIA. They've got 24,000 people on 24,000 entrepreneurs on their program. I can't imagine that ANZ or Sequoia comes anywhere near that amount. And it's not just NVIDIA, it's Google, Apple, Amazon, Meta, Microsoft. So it's gonna be, I think, a tougher road to hoe. for early stage, quite frankly, given the current
There's actually a
economic,
whole
the
theory.
complexion of.
There's a whole theory of venture capital that parts of it don't work because Google and Facebook and all the others exist already, right? It's hard to go
Yeah,
public.
well,
when-
right,
Nobody the second Google's not gonna make as much money as the first Google, right?
yeah. Well, it gets back to who's going to come up with the next network or platform that can out Google or Apple or Amazon,
Marty.
given those 7 heavyweights
Russell.
in the ring throwing their punches around. I'm not saying it's impossible, but if you can come up with that magic sauce, you're definitely going to have something.
Go ahead.
We have a question from the audience?
Yeah, so I think the AI, and yes, it's almost, you look at high frequency trading, there was a huge advantage for the hedge fund for many years, that advantage shrank, and then there's the processor, so as a function of those two variables. So I think for the foreseeable future, there's gonna be a lot of benefit, value added for doing this, 22,000 per se, but I think it's a compliment, and the reason why I say that, I wanna ask Andrea's opinion. So much of, I've been doing venture capital, investing in venture capital since 2001. As I get more experience, in other words, older, I feel that the serendipity, the questions of people being coachable, the intangibles, it's more important. So the fact that I have my team and they love to do spreadsheets, they love to, and for me, it's almost an academic exercise.
Yep.
So I don't think you can just capture that. I think AI will help, but it's a tool. It's not the end-all solution. I don't think it will ever be because of that human serendipity factor. And I don't know if you agree with me or not, but to me, that's a question I have. Because I still think there's a very important part that we can't do this for.
So I think when it comes to trading or hedge funds, now you have more tools. But I would also say I've been approached by numbers of early stage hedge funds or startups, and they seem to think because they have AI in their name that there's something special. What they're forgetting about is in 1990s, a company called Renaissance Technology was using neural networks in the 90s, had over 100 PhDs called physics, math, computer scientists from the top Ivy League schools and then Stanford, and made so much money they don't even take outside capital in, only because they could only deploy so much given the liquidity of the United States market. So I think, yes, there's always ways to make more money, but people should realize the financial markets, with the amount of data they have and the amount of potential for profit and the amount of people 30 years ago investing in computer scientists, physicists, mathematicians to harvest those gains, there's some great competition there. But, there's also going to be great gains to be made if they can pull it off. I would actually like to hear Konstantin's thoughts, because he's much more closer to this than I am.
Thank you, Andreas. Yeah, I agree entirely. So initially, machine learning and first applications of AI were in the area of high frequency trading, where actually it's kind of the same pattern recognition, and which is actually very, very well solvable by machine learning. And it's pretty much being arbitraged very, there's not much money left there. However, if we're talking about the true investing with at least a year out, very, very few people actually use true AI, because that's actually remains still a domain of humans. And believe it or not, even in the long term, humans can benefit of applying some sort of, at the minimum, quantitative and ideally AI-powered overlay that will help them to either optimize the entry or exit points by buying their favorite ideas better, or avoiding some unexpected market turns, which happen all the time in history. So that's an idea. So I totally agree with Andreas that markets do evolve, and AI in the investing world was started many years ago, maybe in the early 80s, even with even the most primitive computers were still around. But yet again, the biggest competition in the long-term investing is still a human who is reluctant to delegate to a machine.
We had Ron Conway's we had Ron Conway's group speak to our group like in 2010. And, I said, how do you know when something is no longer a fad or doesn't have alpha when it comes to venture? And he said, so the speaker from the group said, look at nanotech, that was big in 2007. But it doesn't matter anymore, it's automatically assumed that when you're bringing something that's material science or whatever, it's nanotech capable. Maybe AI is gonna be the same thing, where everybody's gonna assume AI is baked into the equation, and therefore it's not as investable as it was. Or differentiating.
What comes to mind is social media. I mean, you had MySpace, Facebook, some other players, but then there was one winner who took off.
Question for you. Are you concerned at all, and you try to prevent data manipulation, make certain companies look better or certain things? So if you remember Google, everybody figured out their search engine how to get to the top of the list. Are you concerned about that scenario with AI?
Question for me?
For whoever.
Sure, yeah, look, I think a big thing is, as I said before, the AI is only as smart as the data that's fed, right? So I'm also an adjunct professor at FSU. I teach a course on law and technology, and I'm always trying to get the students to get really excited about AI, and I'm always explaining to them, like, listen, whoever is part of this and behind this, they're going to skew things in that direction, and you can't be angry later on that you weren't involved, right? And so in terms of building out these LLMs, you can see the bias now, right? It's not just hallucinations, but if you go ahead and you ask different tools different questions, right? You'll always get funny things skewed, right? You can ask some very interesting questions and sort of see which way it's heading. And so I do think it's a very legitimate concern. The only way I guess there's kind of two ways to mitigate that, right? One is just to try and get more data in and have sort of enough people kind of looking at things. And I think if you take a look at sort of the open source kind of Wikipedia way of doing things, I'm always a fan of that. The other way is to have very strict guardrails on the AI tools that you're using to be able to filter out a lot of the garbage that's out there. But is it a concern? Absolutely. I don't have a solution. I mean, the EU is now coming out with this AI Act, right? There's new regulations coming out. The world is going to change very, very quickly.
I don't share the same concern. I'm a strong supporter of capitalism, not unadulterated capitalism. But I think that having free markets enables the invisible hand to allow competitors to grow better products and services to come to market at lower prices for consumers. And I'm not claiming that unadulterated capitalism is a solution. I think that could be a little dangerous, but going back to your example about having ads rise to the top, I would wager those companies probably had, over the long term, better products and services that they were able to deliver at lower prices. And the same argument was made when cars got rid of horses, and the buggy got put out of business. We saw sort of the same arguments with the internet. I mean, there's Amazon, of course, got rid of every bookstore in every town. And I'm not saying that's good or bad, but I do know that at the end of the day, probably every one of us is getting more product at a cheaper cost more quickly than having to go down to local bookstore. Again, I'm not saying it's a good thing people lose their business, but that's just the nature of capitalism. And by and large, I think we all benefit from it.
Well, those are abstract, right? But the material things have become more costly than ever.
Can you give an example?
Education?
Oh, yeah,
Housing,
absolutely.
Healthcare.
Well, education,
Transportation.
I was talking more about consumer products, and I would agree with you on education.
I think the question
My
was,
only thought about education is calculus is hundreds of years old, but they charge you. I took it and it cost me a couple $100 to learn it. Actually, I took it in high school. It was free. But if you go take it at Ivy University, it costs around $10,000.
So I actually have really radical opinions about education, but I think we're more in line than you might realize. Yes.
Yeah, Andreas, at the start of your commentary, you mentioned that your AI tool had instructed you to spend 10 times your time on software versus hardware. What is sort of like the underlying?
No.
factors?
What I'm
Yeah,
saying
go
is we've gone through AI, cyber, blockchain, video game, crypto, Web3, cloud, virtual reality, metaverse, 3D printing, robots, drones, and we've kind of come up with a heat map and kind of used over 100 or more criteria and AI to kind of tell us who are the best candidates to invest in. And the big differences are with 3D printing, robots, and drones, which involve the physical supply chain, not data, chips, energy, like plastic, copper, platinum, what have you, it basically penalizes them so much that there's not much that our model tells us to allocate. So if we have $100 million to allocate, they're saying $2 million to drones, $2 million to robots, $6 million to 3D printing. That was the nuance there. And then it loves AI if it can come up with inelastic demand, being if you're able to create situations where you have a competitive advantage through AI, companies are willing to pay for it, and they'll pay for it for a long time. Cybersecurity was like the number 2 choice, and that's mainly because as regs go up, more people are going to need more cybersecurity. And once you've got a cybersecurity client, you don't want to be seen as switching too often. It'll put some question marks in regulators and investors' heads. And then video gaming was kind of like, it's very low cost and it scales so quickly and cheaply, it's not even funny. But that's kind of the
is AI
background.
making that determination itself, or is that sort of your underlying thesis in general?
No,
Like,
this
it
is
coming to that
something
determination for you?
this heat map we developed internally, and we're actually using AI on one side and then analysts on the other to do the same, and then we're comparing and contrasting where they come out at. Trying to keep the AI, kind of keeping the AI honest, so to speak. And then we use it as an overall map for investing. Of course, our sourcing isn't going to allow us to give us exactly $20 million of AI, $2 million of drones, but it gives us some backdrop to figure out what types of business models do we want. We want business models where the AI is increasing revenues or decreasing costs, or providing us with superior strategies, risk management, branding, and marketing, et cetera, et cetera.
2 minutes.
Closing statements?
Yeah, closing statements or final last call questions. Sure.
Seems that it's easy to opt in to check the box. If you will have your personal data or AI systems to learn on your data, to feed that back to you. How do you get out once you've screwed up? We've all screwed up, I'm sure.
You don't. And that's the scary thing. So the point that I wanted to make, that I was trying to make earlier with AI, right? You know, like, listen, if there's a data leak, if there's a, cyber breach, I mean, these things happen all the time and they go out into the world. The point with AI is, as I said before, the structured element is the part that I would say is very scary. And the fact that you don't know when it's gonna get spit out. Like, I'll give you an example. I was laughing about this actually before I came on stage. So just quick example. So my team was just experimenting with our tool, and they took off all the guardrails on ChatGPT to test something, okay? On GPT 4.0, so it's like the newest model, right? We usually don't even use GPT, but they were just testing something, doesn't matter what. And we have a document, an NDA, that said that the parties were Looney Tunes and Acme Corp, right? We use these like dummy documents for testing stuff. And then they took off the rails and they asked this question to ChatGPT, who are the parties to this agreement? And so the parties are the United States and the Taliban. Okay, so first of all, hilarious, right? And so funny to see how the AI hallucinates. But my question is, why? Where did this information come from? Right? People have been doing all kinds of weird things with these LLMs and seeing all kinds of weird stuff come out, and that stuff came from somewhere.
It could be dark web.
Exactly. So the point is that you don't know, and the reason that it came out that way is because we were testing our redaction tool where we had encrypted Acme Corp and Looney Tunes, just FYI. So the question was, how come on the encryption it said it's gotta be the Taliban, right? To me, that was little funny, right? And so the point is, whatever you put in there, I'm so sorry. But it is what it, we've all done it, it doesn't matter, it's okay. But for very serious things, we have to start thinking about this stuff.
One thing that comes, oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, please, go ahead.
I was- One thing that comes to mind too is there are two types of people in this world who've been hacked. I'm sure you've heard this before. Those who know they've been hacked and those who don't know they've been hacked. That's just the way that technology is. I guess the other thing too is AI is not the culprit. Decades ago, when people were just collecting consumer behavior, I mean, when the card came out at the local grocery store and you had to fill your name out, they were collecting our data. They were collecting our purchase data. So AI is not this new culprit that's coming after us. If you look, which I have, and I'm sure our lawyer has as well, if you look at when you download a mobile app and you actually scroll through and read the disclosures, everything on your phones, they have full access to, 100%. They can copy it and take it and put it in their own servers. So every single app that you download, one thing that, and I'll just give one last example, I see it quite a bit, and I try to maintain a lot of security on my own product. A lot of websites now say sign in with Google. You know, just the one click.
That's
you can sign with
terrible. The
Google.
last thing you wanna do.
I have read the actual disclosures, so you are now turning your entire life over to Google and every third party in there. So or every third party that they're willing to sell your data to. So there is some stuff you can do to manage that, but it's not new. It's been, it's decades.
So, we're talking about taking off guardrails. So one of the things we do with data is we keep good examples of things that we're interested in, and we also keep bad examples of things that we're interested in. So we're like, this is like kind of the right way, and we're gonna keep, this is kind of the wrong way. So what I've always tried to figure out is when we're going to apply an AI to look at some problem, and we give it all of our data that we've collected, do I leave out, because I need error control going in, I need error control coming out, do I leave out the bad stuff? Or do I let it try and figure out what's good and bad?
So it's a very abstract question, right? We have to like go through step by step to do an exact tool. I mean, the way that I would do it, right? In like my case, is I would put together a folder, I would say, this is all the research that I've done that is good. This is all the bad results, this is why it was bad, et cetera. I would treat my AI like I treat the system, right? Which is just explain.
Okay, we have time for one last question.
It's actually a combination of a statement and question from one of them. Those who are into the modeling, the model validation know it's not just about data. The ML systems that we are used to 40 years ago in engineering, in my thinking, that means that you give it the same data, you get the same output. So Gen AI, by definition, is supposed to think and be creative. So as a result, it's gonna make the shut up. It does, and it's not just data. There is no mathematician that will tell you that they can actually create a proper rail for the model and validations. Essentially, the same way the time series models work, you don't know whether the market is going up, and then goes down. The model is still predicting it's going up, right? So the reality is that the construct of Gen AI and LLM needs guardrails. You need to have a sentinel, a separate group, not the same ones who train the model, to figure out whether the output is usable. So it's really very important because we have a big bet on it, and I don't want to get involved in that, but it is a very different type of AI development that we're going to learn. And Europe has a direct. US has not. It will come to your door because California just about passed it and they pulled it away. And it's going to come. So you cannot just let these agents come into your house and not control it. You gotta control it. So anyway, feel free, if you guys are interested to be part of a club to learn more about this, I'd be more than happy to facilitate.
And
that.
Ron's a PhD in math, right?
Yeah, I have a doctorate in engineering and I started, designing airplanes on supercomputers.
If anybody ever saw the old movie Grease, there was a DJ and he said, I'm the guy that comes into your daughter's bedroom every night. Right? Well, AI does that in a much bigger way these days, right?
I thought you were him.
Yeah. No, he's, Davari.
We go under the map.
Well, listen, great job, guys. Thanks so much, guys online.